Lifeline, Arctic winds, and countless kilometers of snow-covered landscape were all part of the job description. One night, though, everything shifted and the hardness of the environment took on a frightening appearance. It happened on one of those bone-chilling nights in which the darkness seems to go forever. The road in front of me was shrouded by swirling snow, and my headlights could barely penetrate the dense white curtain. I knew I had to keep moving. The shipment must not be delayed. I was obligated to deliver my important life-or-death package to its destination. As I went along the deserted road, a heavy sense of being seen descended upon me like a veil. I peered in my side mirrors, half expecting to see another trucker or even a lone snow plows driver, but all I saw was an infinite expanse of snow and darkness. My CB radio began to crackle, and a trucker's voice broke the eerie calm. Someone or something out of place had been noticed on the road, and he alerted of its presence. It sounded like the ramblings of a fatigued motorist, but the anxiety in his voice was perceptible. I fought off the feeling, convincing myself that it was merely nervousness, but the unease persisted. Every gust of wind against my cab and every crack and groan of the shifting ice beneath my tires appeared to be working against me. The hours dragged on, and I couldn't shake the impression that I was being followed. Then, as if on cue, I noticed a faint glimmer of light in my rearview mirror, a single headlight in the distance that was gradually approaching. As I hurried up to put distance between us, my heart pounded in my chest, but the light remained, inching closer with each passing second. I tried to communicate with any nearby truckers by activating the CB, but the radio simply emitted static. Panic began to chew at the edges of my thoughts as I recognized the truth. There was no one else on this deserted stretch of road. On the snow, the approaching headlight formed weird, stretched shadows. I could now discern the outline of a vehicle, but it was unlike any I had ever seen. It was long, slender, and black, like an armored tank more than a vehicle, and was approaching me at an abnormal rate. My heart raced as I stretched the limits of my car, but the weird vehicle proceeded to effortlessly narrow the gap. I panicked when I realized there was no way to escape this unrelenting pursuer. I veered off the road and onto a frozen lake in a desperate attempt to shake them. My tires screeched against the ice, and I hoped it would give way under the weight of my pursuer's massive car. However, the ice held solid, and the black silhouette continued to pursue me in furious pursuit. As I slid over the icy lake, I attempted to contact for help on my cell phone, but the screen displayed the words "no signal." I was entirely alone on a barren stretch of ice, with a persistent creature pursuing me. As I noticed the far side of the lake, a glimmer of hope on the horizon, I felt as though my heart would burst from my breast. As I raced for safety, I strained the limits of my vehicle, the engine shrieking in protest as I did so. But just as I neared the lake's edge, I felt a vehicle collide with the back of my cab. The impact sent me out of control, and I yelled as my truck slammed into a snowdrift while the world spun around me. When I regained consciousness, I was still in the truck with my heart beating, but the vehicle that was pursuing me was gone. The road in front of me was empty, and the sense of dread that had been hanging over me like a shroud has lifted. I carefully exited my vehicle and surveyed the damage. There was no trace of the unknown vehicle, and there were no traces heading away from the area. It was as though it had never existed. I resumed my journey trembling deeply. I never told anyone about that night, out of concern that they would believe I had lost my mind. But to this day, the recollection of those piercing ice-blue eyes still haunts me, a terrible reminder of the night I had a chilling encounter with the unknown on the cold highways of the far north. As an ice road trucker, I've spent the majority of my life traversing the hazardous highways of the far north, and I've encountered my fair share of terrifying scenarios. But one night, out there in the isolation of the cold woods, I had an encounter that chilled me to my very core. It happened during a particularly intense snowstorm, one of those dazzling whiteouts that make even the most seasoned truck driver white-knuckle the wheel. The persistent snowfall had transformed the route into an icy, curving maze, and visibility was nearly non-existent. I knew I had to pull over and wait out the storm or risk becoming a statistic on this stretch of harsh highway. I parked my vehicle in a little pull-off area in the hope that the worst of the storm would soon pass. Outside in the howling winds, the cab felt like the only safe refuge in the world. The radio hummed with stories of other truckers who had taken shelter for the night. As I settled in, the hours dragged on as the storm continued to rage. Despite my best attempts to keep the cab heated, the cold was penetrating. The only thing that disturbed the awful silence outside was the constant pounding of snow against the windows. I looked at the clock and saw that it was well beyond midnight. The night's silence was abruptly broken by the faint sound of music in the distance. It was hauntingly lovely music that sent chills down my spine. It seemed as if someone was playing a violin in the storm, but who would be insane enough to make music in such conditions? I decided to investigate since my curiosity overpowered me. I donned my heaviest clothing and walked out into the stinging cold. The music appeared to be emanating from the neighboring tree line, so I hiked through knee-deep snow to get there. The song became clearer with each stride, but something was unsettling about it. It resembled a siren song, in that it was lovely and enticing but also included a hint of danger. In the swirling snow, I could not see anyone or anything, but the music dragged me deeper into the darkness. Then, as I was going to turn around, I noticed activity out in the distance. A mysterious figure emerged from the storm while swaying to the eerie melody. It was a woman, or it appeared to be one. She wore a long flowing dress that billowed in the wind, and her hair, tangled and untamed, framed her pale face. My voice barely carried over the howling winds as I attempted to communicate with her. She did not reply and continued dancing in the snow. The closer I approached, the more I sensed something was badly wrong. Her motions were elegant, but disconnected, as if her limbs were moving without her will. When I went out to touch her shoulder, I got a good look at her face. Her eyes were emotionless and lacking recognition. It was as if she were in a trance from another universe, dancing to a melody that only she could hear. I was overcome with fear and attempted to retreat, but she gripped my wrist with fingers as brittle as ice. Her hold was surprisingly strong, and I struggled to escape as she leaned in and blew cold air into my ear. She muttered, with a terrifying hiss, "You shouldn't have come here." With a wave of adrenaline, I wrenched my wrist away and stumbled across the snow, my pulse pounding. The woman continued to dance as her form vanished into the raging storm. I did not dare to pursue her. Instead, I rushed back to my vehicle with my mind racing in terror. I locked the doors, the cab's warmth in stark contrast to the icy terror outside. The eerie music continued to reverberate in my ears, and I could not shake the impression that I had nearly dodged something incomprehensible. As the rain eventually began to subside, I waited until the first light before leaving my shelter with caution. There was no indication of the mystery woman or her haunting music, as if she had never been there at all, and as swiftly as my vehicle would allow, I sped away from that deserted stretch of road, my heart heavy with the weight of the terrifying encounter I had just had. I still cannot understand what transpired that night, and I never wish to experience it again. The cold tundra conceals many mysteries, some of which are best left alone. I've spent years as an ice road trucker, and I've witnessed my fair share of dangers on these frozen roadways. One night, however, I'll never forget a scary experience with another ice road trucker that had me wondering everything. I was transporting supplies to a remote outpost in the northern tundra during the dead of winter. The roads were dangerous, and visibility was nearly non-existent due to the snowstorm. I relied on my GPS and many years of experience to lead me through the barren roadway. The radio was filled with the chatter of other truckers, each of whom reported identically horrible conditions. We were all simply attempting to reach our destinations without incident. The radio then broadcast a voice that sent shivers down my spine. "Anybody out there needs a little company tonight." It was a thick, gravelly voice with an ominous undertone. The radio went silent for a time, and then anxious laughing and contemptuous answers resumed. Nobody desired a piece of this. However, my curiosity got the best of me. I activated the radio and replied, "Who you are? What do you desire?" The voice on the other end of the line let out a low, disturbing chuckle. "Simply searching for someone to travel with, friend. These solitary nights can become quite chilly." I did not like the direction this was taking. I informed him that I was fine on my own and did not require any company. But he persisted, inquiring about my route, where I was going, and even personal information concerning my life. It felt intrusive, as though he was praying for details. Then I saw something strange. On my GPS, a marker had flashed on the screen, indicating the location of another truck, which was approaching mine. I had not disclosed my precise location over the radio, so how did this individual know where I was? I became immediately suspicious and opted to pull over at the next available moment, in the hopes of losing whoever this was. As I slowed down and prepared to park, though, I noticed approaching headlights in my rearview mirror. It was the radio-heard trucker. I could see him in the cab as a shadowy silhouette behind the wheel when his truck drove up alongside mine. He lowered his window, and I unwillingly followed suit. I could not see his face due to the darkness inside his taxi. All I could see were his icy eyes. "Change your mind about any company?" he questioned with a malicious tone. I attempted to appear tough by urging him to back off, but my heart was thumping wildly. He did not answer and only regarded me with those unsettling eyes. Suddenly, he cranked his engine and drove off into the night, vanishing into the swirling flurry. My hands shook on the steering wheel as I witnessed his taillights depart. I was unable to articulate what had just transpired, but I was aware that I had nearly escaped a terrifying confrontation. There was something irrational and profoundly frightening about the other ice road trucker. I continued on my path, frequently checking my mirrors in the hope that his truck might emerge. However, he had vanished, consumed by the freezing wilderness. I eventually arrived at my destination, unloaded my cargo, and returned to civilization. I reported the weird encounters to my dispatcher and the local authorities, but there was little they could do. Due to the isolation of the ice roads, it was difficult to investigate incidents like mine. I do not know who the other ice road trucker was or what his objectives were to this day. Even in the most isolated regions, you're never completely alone on the road, as evidenced by those scary eyes and ominous radio voices.